got an awesome conversation. My own coach hit me up and he was like, bro, it's time to rock out. Let's get on a podcast and let's jam out. So we intro a little bit differently here because I'm all about like building people's like success or like getting people to celebrate like their own success. So like I'm gonna like turn it over to you for like 30 seconds and just kind of like let you introduce you and then we'll just dive in from there.
Oh man, what's up, man? Dude, thanks for
What's
having me
up?
on. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, set me up there for sure, dude. So happy we get to kind of jam out with this. Yeah, so I think people they ask a lot. They're like, "Tell us your backstory, give us a highlight reel or whatever," and I'm like, "Okay, but like, I don't even know. What do you want to know?" And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
I always start with this is, or yeah, where I start with this is like, I believe that one of the big lies that we've been fed, I don't know, even in society, but just as people, oftentimes from good-hearted people that care about us or whatever, is that the reality that we know as far as like how the world works, the way that we think the world works is the way the world works. And like
Yeah.
that's just like not true, right? It's a
Right.
way the world works, right? But it's not the way the world works. And when you shift from the way to a way, then that opens up the possibility of like there being other ways to go and achieve the outcome potentially much better, much faster, much easier, like in things of that nature. Not that it's not hard work, but you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And
Right.
so when people are like, what's the highlight reel or what's the like, or like introduce yourself or like whatever, I just, rather than like stating all of my accomplishments, I start with that frame of like, that's how I want to, like, that's how I kind of approach life and like to think about things. And so my highlight reel, if you will, or my, like what I've done or do or who, whatever this thing, right, is. I know, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm your coach and I've got
Yeah.
to hang out with some really, really dope, awesome, amazing, incredible people. But the reason that is, and I've got to do some cool things is, I mean, we've grown millions of followers on social media, right? And done branding. We've done tens of millions of dollars in revenue online. Done branding, coached hundreds and hundreds of students. Like actually like coach them. I mean, we've had thousands of like actual like client course
Right.
buyers or whatever,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like actually like coaching, like sitting down and working with them and understanding them and helping them grow. And I know you're in the coaching the sports space, which is so cool, right? But the reason that's kind of like fueled all that is because I've like just been obsessed with just understanding different ways the world can work, right?
Right.
And then like figuring out how I can change my way or reality of thinking around the world to get where I want to be, right? And so that's kind of like the lens when it comes to like, I mean, I want to be super successful and like, make tons of money and be around really, really influential people and right, like that change the world, that world in my way, right? But the way that I've gone about doing that is not the traditional route. It
Totally.
has been, very much the approach of I want to experience how to do things fast, how to do things differently, how to get a result in a unique way that is just untraditional, right? And everything that has come in my life, or most, has been the untraditional path to actually getting there. And so that's kind of like a little bit of a context of all of anything that I share is not from a lens of like, oh, I'm so great or do or like whatever, right? Like we
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
have our
Yeah.
things. We all have the things that we're super duper good at. But it's that. It's like, how do we get to go and experience life? Or how can we see the world differently and go, hey, the way that I know the world right now is not the way the world works. It is a way the world works. What if I could switch it? Make
Totally.
sense?
Yeah. And I think that like, dude, it's so interesting because I know a lot of the conversations like you and I have had and like shifting the perceptions and shifting of the beliefs of, and like we hear this in the sports world so freaking much. It's like 1% better, 1% better, 1% better. And it's this idea of like incremental growth. It's like a little bit each day. And, you and I have talked about a lot is like the idea of like taking quantum leaps, right? Like
Yeah.
having exponential growth. And I think that, that's one of the biggest shifts that, you've kind of like instilled in me. And I think that
Yeah.
that's super powerful, like for anybody to actually understand, because I think everybody wakes up every day. It's like, all right, like I just got to get a little bit better today.
Mm-hmm.
And, versus the idea that like, we're literally just talking about this is like the idea one day you're going to wake up and there's going to be this massive jump and you're going to be like, WTF, like I don't even know what just happened in my
Right.
entire life.
Well, but I think, and I think that's a great point, right? And I think it's not an either or. I think it's a both and.
Yeah.
because the quantum jumps don't happen. And by the way, when we say the word quantum or whatever, we're not talking some woo woo, like,
Right. Right.
oh, like magic is going to happen one day. But like, no, like just understanding how the world and opportunity actually shifts. Right. But it is those opportunities come when you are consistent. Right.
Yeah.
And so the 1% better every day, absolutely important. Right. But if that
Right.
is the only thing you are ever looking for, right? If the only thing that your goal is, if I just keep doing 1% better every single day, it's like, okay, yeah, but if you keep doing 1% better every day, it's still only 1%.
Right.
Right. And people can be like, oh yeah, compound interest. And yes, there is the element of that, right? Like the
Right. Right.
compound interest of 1% of 1%. I get that. But like, we talk about this money. That's my wheelhouse in my world, right? Is I'm like, I grew up super poor. I grew up with no money, right? And so I just thought that the way the money worked was just like every month you just, made enough to get by, or you hope to get a 10% raise or a 20% raise. And I'm like, yeah, but that's like level one. There's like 95
Yeah.
more levels, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
it's like you get in the big money and it's just like little, and then like huge payday right. And so it's a combination of both. And I think when I look at it as coach, I have tremendous respect for coaches, by the way, in any category. I think it's one of the most difficult jobs to do well, which is why there's a ton of really terrible coaches, right?
Totally.
Right. And so I think it's why I respect you a lot too. Is like you do a very good job with your coaching stuff. Is like coaching, it's a difficult job because you're dealing with humans and beliefs and like, oh my gosh, right? But when I think about having massive transformations, like people, like I want people to have massive breakthroughs.
Right.
I want myself to have massive breakthroughs that they cannot go back to the reality of what was before. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Here's a deep thought for you, because like I know before I told you is like we want to get into the idea of like influence, and you've been like really good at being able to be influential with others and honestly set yourself up to influence influencers to pay attention to you, if that makes sense. So the question becomes too is like, because like how do you influence yourself, right? Because like I think if you look in the mirror, i.e. literally just watch the video that you sent me over, it was the whole like Hermosi of looking in the mirror. Like if you coached yourself, right, like you would probably tell yourself something completely different than you're doing now. And so like how do you implement that? How do you relay that into your own life? Because obviously you've had your own incredible amounts of success, whether you want to talk about it financial, whether you want to talk about it in coaching, whether you want to talk about it in business, relationship, whatever is, but how do you go about like influencing yourself, so to speak?
Yeah, for sure. It's a good question. So I think there's two answers to this here. So coaches, that's one answer, right?
Yeah.
But I'll tell you a story here that I think will help maybe answer that question a little bit better. I grew up poor, right? I grew up, I don't say broke, right? Like poor is a kind of a mindset, right? But we broke. We had no money for sure, right? And no special talents, no special abilities, or connections, or any of that. And I just had an insane work ethic because I was like in pain all the time of like, I just don't want to be broke and have no money and like feel trapped my whole life. I just want to be free, and right. And so like when I first started going with everything, like it was just like I didn't even know what I wanted. I mean, I kind of did. I was like, I want to be rich. I want to be famous. I want out. Right. I want out.
Yeah.
And so it didn't even take much influence to like get me to take action or whatever, just because I was like so locked in on where I wanted to go and what I wanted to avoid. Right. But also what's interesting with that is like, because I didn't actually sit down and think about it, like, even though I had a fair amount of success with that. Right. And, millions of followers on social media have grown, and, all some form of, lots of success around high level clients and stuff. It wasn't until my brother actually passed away in a helicopter crash so I had an older brother who passed away in a helicopter crash. He left behind, a 5-year-old son. His wife was pregnant at the time. It was a really rough situation, right? That I actually sat down and started getting real coaching, right? Like I sold my company after that. I went around the world with my wife, and she got sick with an intestinal eating parasite while we were over there. We had to take emergency flights home. I burned through savings. I would like end up in my wife's mom's house at Christmas time, right? While we were looking for a place to live when we got back, and she was in the hospital, right? And I'm like, how the frick did I get here? Right? How did I get from like what felt at the time like on top of the world, right? I wasn't really happy then, but like, how did I get to that from that point to here? And how do I get where I'm going? And I don't even know where that was the issue. I had no idea where I was going. I had no clue. It was a very dark. It was very dark. It was a very dark time in my life, and I was very confused. And so in that moment, I took basically all the money I had left, actually technically more than all the money I had left, right, to hire a very expensive, I hired a mindset coach, right? I hired a coach. And what she taught me through that process, I'm going to skip ahead here for a second. I'm going to come back to this. What she taught me in that process was actually very fascinating, because not more than even just maybe a week and a half ago, I had a client of mine, very successful, tons of money, owns 3 companies, right? He was out at my place and we were working on some stuff. And I asked him, this is after like 14 hours together. I asked him, I was like, hey, what advice would you give to, your younger self, right? If you were my age. And first he said, like, have a lot of kids, right? Cause he's got like 6 kids.
Yeah.
But second, he was like, know what you want. He's like, I spend so much time figuring out what I want. Like so much time. This is a guy with 6 kids, runs 3 companies, very involved in his church. He's not like he has tons of time, right? And so going back to like this situation where I was very, very dark, in that moment, what that coach taught me, or showed me rather, was that every single decision that I had made pretty much up until that point in life was determined by some external factor. Right? Yeah. It was to prove somebody wrong. It was because I didn't feel like I was enough. It was to like whatever, right? It was to impress somebody, whatever that, it was an external reason. And so because it was an external reason, my entire life was influenced by external forces. I didn't even have internal forces like controlling my life. I just had an insane work ethic, right? That was it.
Yeah.
And so when I went through this process of being coached by her, she was like, hey, first off, we've got to figure out who Josh is, right? Who is Josh? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't even know what you mean by that question, right? And I'm guessing like, you probably work with your students on this. And if there's coaches, you definitely know. You ask your athletes, right? You're like, who are you? Right? Or like
100%.
Right? They're like, they don't
literally
even know
the first question.
Right. This is what good coaches do. If you're on, if you're a coach right now listening, like this is what you do. You're good at your job. Right. And I respect you for that. But like your students, they probably don't even know. They don't even actually understand the question you're really asking them.
100%. Totally.
Right. They're like, what do you mean? What I am? Like my answer to that was like, I don't know. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a Patriots fan. I don't know. Like, I don't know. Right.
Yeah.
I didn't know so to answer your question about influencing yourself was like, first I had to understand who I was.
Totally. Yeah.
Right. And then once I was aware of like who I am, good or bad, it didn't matter. It was just like objectively, this is where I was at in my finance, where I was at in my health, where I was at in my relationship, like who I was and how I operated. Then I could go and I could start molding and figuring out who I wanted to become based on what the conversation 2 weeks ago was, which is what is it that I actually wanted, right? And so once I can figure out that, it's like it's very hard to figure out what you want until you actually know who you are,
where you are current. Yeah,
it's super crazy, right?
Yeah. Do you feel like as you're going on this like internal discovery, self-discovery, so to speak, do you feel like most of those answers like already exist inside of you? And like I'll give context too, because I feel like so many, even as they go try to figure out and answer the question, like, who am I? It's like they're looking around, right? It's like, well, I'm a father, I'm a sister, like they're still looking externally. And so it's like, even when I talk to like a lot of the athletes, I always say, it's like, if I don't remember where I heard this, but I'm like, if I ever wanted to hide something from you, I would just hide it inside of you because you would never think to look there.
That's good. That's right.
Good. And so it's like the idea of, because their answer is like, we want confidence, we want self-esteem, we want belief, like we want all these things. I'm like, great. They're literally already inside of you. You have to go unlock those doors. You have to take the time to like, I always say it's like, find the people with the keys or just go find the keys, right? Like whether it's having a coach to be able to unlock the door and show you that those things, those potentials, those talents, those skills already exist inside of you. Or self-discovery, it's like you're venturing around, it's like, a key. It's like, oh man, it unlocks this door. Man, like I have this already inside of me. So do you feel like that was kind of the journey, the process with you? It was like, man, like I discovered more about myself that already existed. I was just kind of blinded by it, so to speak.
So yes, like in the context that you're asking that question, 100%.
Cool.
I'm going to expound on that here for a second, right? But yes. And I love what you said, like people, I still look external. I was like, okay, well, what does my wife say that I am?
Right.
Who does who does my mom say that I am? Well, who does my client say that I am? My coach is like, no, right? Who are you? Like, who do you say you are? Right. And so, 100%. I believe, so I have someone of deep faith. And I believe that, we are created in the image of God. Right. And so if God is all powerful, knowing, if he is in an infinite intelligence, right? And I think that no matter what you believe, if you're religious of any sort, I think we can all kind of conceptually agree on that, right? Of like, there's probably this infinite being, right?
There is a higher power.
Higher power, and he is infinitely knowledgeable, or at least infinitely more knowledgeable than we are, right? So I think that, in my belief, yes, the answers are already inside of me, but the answers were already inside of me, not because of some magical, like I was so smart, but because they were put there by a very intelligent being who I call God. And I serve, I worship Jesus Christ specifically, but like put there for a reason inside of oneself. And we have been lied to very, very good, or very, very good, very, very well. We've been lied to very, very well by, call it whatever evil forces that you want, or the world today, right? The negative powers of those that be. I think that the negative forces actually are intelligent, right? But once again, we've been lied to by this fact that we should find external validation or whatnot, right? And so it is true in athletes, this is true in coaches, this is true in every area. So when I went on the journey of it, for me, I'm going to go and discover who I am. And in the process of discovering who I am, because I believe that was put there intelligently, I am who Christ says I am, right? And the more I search and figure out who I am, the more I figure out who God tells me I am, because he put those things there for a reason, right? He put the desires of my heart and about me in those separate from you, right? Yeah. And so that's why I'm very, very confident in, like, I hate the personal development gurus are like, go find yourself, right? I'm like, okay.
The self-sabbatical.
Right. Like, I'm like, okay, there's truth to the concept of going and studying oneself, but it's not like it's some mystical thing. It's just like, no. You have been given talents and skills and desires and for a reason, right? And if you can tap into those and you believe it came from intelligence, right? Intelligent, infinite. I then believe that also unlocks unlimited power, right? Because is tied to a higher power. That power then gets to flow through you, right? And so I believe that confidence is created from within. I believe that, and also there's external things that back it up. Like you can create external confidence, but like the core of it comes from that within, right? And so, 100%. Through that journey and the process of everything, I think that the more you study yourself and understand that you are yourself, but also you were designed, you were created, you have power, but you also only have a certain amount of power, right? You can create your own reality, but also you can only create the reality that you want through the limitations of what you've been given, right? And those limitations are far greater than we think they are. Like you can go much farther, but it's still like, I can't create the life that Ryan can. Ryan can't create the life that I can. And your students can't create the life that you, right? Because we've been given different gifts,
Yeah. So this will be interesting too, because like, as I toy and play with, and like, I always come back, and you and I have had this conversation a couple times before. It's like, I always come back to this idea of like, kind of by accident, it's like every team, every camp, every time I ever got in front of a group, I always played this like stupid game, right? Hold out your hand. Somebody's like swipes their hand in between yours and you're trying to clap it. And it's this idea of that, like when you take control, it's like you tend to have more success. I.e., I call it like you're the creator of your life. You're the creator of your experience. You're the creator of the outcomes and the desires that you want. but it doesn't guarantee anything, right? It's this idea that if we're going to go to the casino, we want to play the games that like give us the highest percentage of winning. And so I always like, as I talk with people, is I feel like, and I'm just curious, get your opinion on this, is a lot of times I'll get pushback. It's the idea of like, well, no, like some higher power like created me. And so I'm curious, like your perspective is actually, I was having a conversation with one of the athletes literally this morning today. And it was the idea of like, okay, very deep. She's very deep into her faith. Right. And it was this idea of, yes, but God created me, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yes, 100%. But who's in control of creating that relationship with him? He says he's there waiting on you. He says he's essentially there with open arms, but you have to be the one to willing to take the step forward, to build the relationships and do the things that actually require that relationship with him to grow. Yeah. So I'm kind of curious your perspective of like what your thoughts and beliefs are on that. And like, how do you balance, if you do believe that like you have some sense of power of creating the experiences in the life that you want, like how do you balance that intertwine like within like your faith as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that the age old argument, first off, I want to get to how you do things. Like I want to hear like your coaching mechanism and style. So I want to go there next. Okay. But, cause I'm curious on that too, but you seem to know for not being that religious, you certainly
everyone says that. We can go backstory too. Everyone, this exact athlete, she's like, Ryan, you seem to know a lot about this.
Yeah. I mean, the age old conversation of like, Calvinist versus, someone basically that believes that you have free will or if everything's predestination. Right. And I'm like, I do not believe in predestination. That is for sure. Right. That being said, like I would say that you'd be hard pressed to find someone who is more religious, not in like rule following, but I mean, I do follow a lot of religious rules, but like, as far as like honoring God and understanding that God is all powerful and God created me for a reason, then I do, right? I'm very, very, I respect that. I honor that. Like I'm very religious in that sense. Right. Like, so, if anyone's listening to that right now, that's like, okay, I'm religious and this, no, believe me, I am. Like God was very clear that number one, that like when God made man, okay, let's just go back to the creation story, okay, for a second. In Genesis, God created the earth and he created like, the heavens and the earth. He created the, earth was without form. And then he created, tree or light and trees and animals and all that, whatever, right? And then there's this interesting thing that happens. When he goes to create man, how did he say he created man? He said he created man in his image. He didn't create anything else in his image. He created him, man and woman in God's own image, right? So if we are a reflection of God, we are, right? I mean, if you believe in religion or capacity, like of any capacity, right? Then like, who is God for a second, right? What do we know about God? Okay. Well, the very first thing that we know about God, ready for this? The very, very first thing that we know about God. Okay. In the beginning, God, what?
I'm lost. What do you mean?
In the beginning, God created
the heavens and the earth.
He created. So the very first thing that we know about God is that God is a creator. Okay.
I'm following you.
With me? Yeah. So if we're made in the image of God, what does that mean? We are
a creator.
We are creator.
Shit, fire. Damn.
Right?
Yeah.
Hey, you with me for a second here, though?
Yeah. I follow you.
So all of a sudden, that means that in some capacity, now we can argue what this capacity looks like here, and I love arguing this, right? This is fun. Yeah. But like, first, we got to lay some foundations for a second here, right? Which is we are creators by default. In the beginning, God created. We are made in the image of God. God is created. We are creators, right? So that means God has given us choice. God has given us agency. God has given us power to create, right? To co-create this reality with him. It's the ultimate thing. This is why choice matters, right? Right? We have choice. We have the ability to go and choose. We have the ability to create. And so when you look at it from that lens, God goes, hey, listen, cool. Here you go. First off, you get to choose me or not choose me. I don't want to get too religious here for a second, but like this. So there's your kind of the first big thing, choose me or not. But then if you choose God, or even if you don't, right? But like the next thing is then, cool, here are the parameters. Here's the world I put you in. And as long as you operate within this world, because if you die, then you're out of this world. But as long as you're alive, you get to now create freely, right? By the way, here's some laws. Here's some rules. Don't kill people, right? That's one of the boundaries of when you're creating. Don't kill people, right? Don't do some of these. But so my response back to this is I 100% believe that we have the ability to create a reality, and we have to create a version of ourselves and the life that we want to go and have. There's another verse in the Bible that says, that God gave you the desires of your hearts. So that would mean that it's not just that we are creators, but that each one of us have been given different forms of desires for a reason. There's a reason we desire those things. And so, like, guess what? I'm not the best athlete in the world. It's not my thing, right? I'm not LeBron James, right? I'm just not, right? Yeah. I'm not athletically gifted in that way, right? But like, that doesn't mean that I can't create in other ways. That doesn't mean I can't go and do. And if I wanted to be in the athletic world, there's lots of ways to be involved in the athletic world, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Right. Based on my gifts and talents. So I absolutely believe in your own power and the ability to create this life that you want to go and do. And I believe that it's biblical. I believe that God has given us these desires, that we need to sit down, that we need to be good steward of our talents, that we need to do this. And that if we are not intentional about creating our life, we're actually doing mankind a disservice, because we will be ruled by those that do. But guess what? There's infinite upside, meaning that if everyone were creating their own reality, if everyone would go, the consciousness of man, the expansion of humankind would be just infinitely greater. But instead, only a few people at the top are actually creating anything. And then everybody else is like, I can't create. And then we live in their world just because they're choosing to and we're not.
Victim.
For sure. Without even realizing we're victims in a lot of areas, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think it goes back to the game is like I always say, it's like you're just trying to clap your hands in hopes that you catch a little bit of success. You catch the relationship that you want. You catch the career that you want. You catch, for a lot of these athletes, that like, if I get a scholarship or not. And most of the time it does not turn out in the way that you actually desire. So I find that
you gotta get locked in. You gotta go create that world, right?
Yeah. Sure, yeah. 100%. And it goes back to literally where this whole conversation started is like knowing who you are, like figuring that out. And once I can figure that out, then I give myself the ability to actually go create. This is how our relationship started, 1.0 and 2.0, right?
Yeah, 100%. Totally. And I want to turn the conversation short. It's kind of what you do. One final just thought on that is, and when people are like, but there's things out of your control, 100%. And some people think that those things happen by accident or it's just circumstance or whatever. But I'm like, I actually believe there's a actual evil negative force that wants to destroy you, right?
Right.
That does not want to see you succeed. So why do bad things happen? Well, you can think they're by accident, but everything's all connected, right? Like this. So when you realize that, hey, guess what? There is a negative force out there. And guess what? Bad things are going to happen. You can't control bad things, right? Guess what? My brother died in a helicopter crash, right? And left behind like all that. That was some bad stuff. I've been through some great things, right? But it's like, okay, cool. This is the hand I'm going to dealt. What am I going to do with it? What am I going to create with it? These are the resources I've been given. So I think that's absolutely crucial. Now, and I want to turn the conversation to you because I know you do a lot of coaching. I know you work. I know you work alongside other coaches as well, right? Mm-hmm. And you kind of complement them in a very, very interesting way, awesome way, right? What does that look like? Why is what you do unique? And like, cause like, when I first heard what you did, I was like, so like, do you like take over coaches' jobs for them? Right. Yeah. I was like, I don't understand. Why would a coach hire you? Are they like threatened that you're going to like take their job? You're like, no. And I'm like, oh, so like what, before you go to like frameworks or like how you do anything for a second, like help me understand, like what specifically makes you and what you do so unique, special, and powerful?
Well, I think that most people come in. I'm not an expert in sports psychology. I'm not an expert in mindset. I would say that like the way that I would describe it, it's funny. My mom literally texted me this last night. She's like, if somebody asked me what exactly you do, what would I tell them? And I would say that I'm more along the lines of like the expert in like human development, right? And I believe that as we take a step back and if we can understand the person, if we can start to create the person first, then the athlete, the relationships, and everything else starts to flow more naturally. Where most people come in is they start where I would call like at the top of the ladder, and they just try to change the athlete. And most of these athletes have been trying to make that athletic shift. They've been trying to change who they are as an athlete for like years, even over a decade, and it's frustrating, and they don't feel like it works. And so it literally comes back to a lot of like the who are you, and once we can understand like who we are as a person, human development, then we can start to build and create like outside of those parameters. But I would say like that's at like the core of everything. Is I mean, I know I'm beating a dead horse, but it's 100% true. It's just like understanding like who we are, and like most people don't. And it's the same, honestly, even with coaches, right?
So can I
Yeah, press.
like yeah, or just a follow up question with that, because that's I I think I agree with you 100%. Like I think I fundamentally agree with everything here. So when you say like you come in at like the human level and like how understand who people are or whatever, when you say that like these athletes have been trying to change who they are as an athlete like for years and it's not working, what are they like? How is what you do different than that? And like, why does it work? Because it sounds like they are trying to change who they are, or as an athlete, or like what specific, like what's the difference?
They're missing puzzle pieces. I would say is most of these athletes that's come in is, and from a very generic standpoint, is like they've just tried to change their self-talk, right? It's like, oh, we just have to think positive. We just have to write down our affirmations. We got to wake up in the morning and we got to say our affirmations. And when we're at practice and we feel fearful or worried or doubtful, like we just got to go back and like repeat our words or like whatever it is. It's like that's only one element of the entire puzzle. Like your thoughts is only one part of your being. There's the emotional side of things. There's so many other pieces. And I don't just believe, I know that like when you can let's just tie those two together in terms of like your thoughts and your feelings, right? Or the way that you think and the emotions that you have, that becomes 1 + 1 is 5. And it's so much easier. I always ask everybody, I'm like, what's more powerful, your thoughts or feelings? And most people would agree from a power standpoint, like their emotions or their feelings. I'm like, yeah, like how many times have you, let's use a gymnast, since everybody knows I work a lot with gymnastics, it can be any sport, right? Like how many times have you're about to do something, you're about to perform, you walk in the arena, you're trying to do a new skill or something at practice, and you have this terrifying like gut, like, or this wrench in your gut. I say it's like borderline need a diaper, right? Like you're about to pee, you're about to shit your pants, like you don't even know what to do. And then you try to tell yourself like, you got this, you got this, you got this. Like, how often does that work out? And they're like, very rarely. I'm like, exactly. You've been like, this is the problem. It's not that that doesn't matter. It's like, but we got to go in and we got to wire from a human side, because you've just become addicted to like this fear and this worry and this guilt and this shame and this doubt and this stress and this anxiety. It's like, now we got to go in and basically rewire yourself from a human standpoint, because you're only at practice, college athletes. I mean, it's basically 20 hours a week, right? And like, that's not going to override, because we need to be able to like to tip the scales. And so I think that there's just so many like missing elements, missing puzzle pieces, so to speak, on well-intended people. And I think that some people may have success with the idea. I mean, there's books out there on positive self-talk, self-talk alone. But in my experience is most of these athletes, it's like, it's not working. Right. And so, and even I'll take one step farther is, let me say this one thing too, is it's even as they go and sit down and create. I'm not a big write your goals down. Like I call it different things, because they snub their nose at goals, right? Like the moment you come in and say goal setting, you're like, all right. So we call them objectives right? We just name it something different. But I'm like, how many times has anybody come in to you or coach you and said, okay, we're going to do goal setting? Yeah. And like, how many of you guys actually know the importance of goal setting? Yes, we do. Okay. I'm like, how many other coaches have come in and said, okay, we need to write down the emotions attached, the feelings, the celebration, like that you would have if you had it now. And they're like, nobody. I'm like, but you just told me feelings are more powerful. So we need to get very clarity on if we had X, how would that make us feel? So every time we think about it, we're just ping ponging back and forth. And now we start to create that reality a little more because we've just attached a feeling to it. It's not magic, right? It's like,
So what happens? Okay, so I think I understand the difference with that, which is it makes sense. So what happens when I do that effectively versus like, because if I just self-talk or I just like whatever, like you said, I get out there in the big moment and like, dude, this is me. Like I spoke on a huge stage, right? And like,
right, yeah,
dude, I was like so pumped about it, so great. And then like, oh my gosh, it's like the night before and I am losing it, freaking out, right? I'm like, what am I gonna say? I don't even know, blah, blah, blah. And I like called one of my coaches at the time, right? And I was like, what I did, he's like, bro, why are you thinking about this? Just go be you, right? He's like, just stop. Like, you're gonna walk on the stage. Like, do you know your topic? I was like, I don't even know my topic. He's like, bro.
yeah.
All right. He's like, you know your topic. I'm like, all right. You know, rewrote the whole presentation like the night before. And I didn't even rewrite it. It's just like it clicked. I knew what I was gonna say. I woke up the next morning, went out there, was crushed, right? It was amazing. So like I get that. So what happens when for you, like with these athletes, like if I'm a coach right now and I've got to like what happens with my athletes, or if I'm an athlete, what happens when I do this your way versus the other way? What's the difference? How do I know if it's working?
I almost want to answer it in one word. Well, it's a couple words. It's a phrase. I would say in very generic, it's like peace of mind where things just start to flow because most athletes,
Yeah, but bro, peace of mind where things
hold on.
Okay,
Hold on. I'm going because you can watch in a practice room where, or in competition where, like I say they obsess over like accomplishing something, right? You can literally see them trying so effing hard. And it's like they're getting further and further away from where they actually want to go, right? It's like, I can't tell you how many coaches have literally excused people from practice because it's like, you're trying so hard, you're pushing yourself further away, you're actually making yourself worse. Like, go home, reset, let's come back tomorrow. And so it's this idea of, it's the weird, what's the word I'm looking for? Like dynamic. It's this interesting perspective to where it's like the less I care, the better, typically like the better outcomes I get.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so it's like when I give myself, when I free myself, because I know like how I actually want to feel and I can step into those, it's like, I don't have any worries. I don't have to stress about it. It just is. It's just who I am. It's part of my being. I can just show up. And now I walk in the arena and I'm the most powerful person in the room. I walk in the arena and I don't look across and like compare myself. It's like, oh my God, that's the number one team in the country, or they just won a national championship. I don't give a shit anymore because I view myself as the most powerful person, as the highest level of achiever, like in the practice room, in the arena. Like it doesn't matter, right? I'm not necessarily verbally saying it, but it's like, that's how I feel. And that's the person that I start to embody, so that now I can go out and perform for most of them, like what their actual real potential is at that given time.
Makes sense. Okay. So how do you do that?
How do I do what?
Like, what's your process of how you help athletes achieve that level of power?
Yeah. So I think, again, beat a dead horse is step one is like stupidly clear about like who we are like right now. It's beat into me. I mean, you put the nail in the coffin, even like being around you is this idea of, I didn't realize, honestly, I knew what I knew, but I didn't know at what level I knew, like, and like get around like people like you, is the idea of how honest we have to be with ourselves. And so that's been, as I spend more time, it's like, okay, how honest can we be about who we are right now until where like we actually want to go, and the willingness, the open-mindedness to having I call it a guide, mentor, of somebody to be able to make suggestions along the way. I call it like, there's two examples. It's kind of like having like a tour guide, right? Like if I went and visited a completely different country, it's like, do you want somebody that's a friend that's been there one time and thinks they know everything and they're going to walk around? Or when you get there, do you want somebody, a local person that's lived there for 40 years? It's like, yeah, I know everybody says go there, but like, let me show you all the cool spots. Like, let me show you actually where you're going to have fun. Let me show you, like, in this case, like peace of mind, like where your actual talents are, like where your skill sets is, so that you can actually show up and actually be you. And as we build that, what I call like connection, because ultimately, like trust and connection is everything, right? Like I think that's the heartbeat of any relationship. And so as we move along from there, we get into more like different levels of clarity in terms of like different boxes, like different, I call them like buckets, right? And so is, I don't like the word like goal setting or like goals. And so what I use with whether it be an individual or with a team, I call it a mission, right? And how I think at first I got a lot of pushback on this. It's the idea that I was going into teams and it was like freaking like 15, 20, 25, like 30 things like listed out that they wanted to accomplish that season. I'm like, yes, but if you could have one, like if you have one thing, like what would it actually be? And as we start to narrow the focus is they realize it's like now we can actually get 10, 15, 20, 50, 100 people rowing in the same direction versus one day
35 different directions.
Yeah. One day this group's going for
100%.
that. And it was like, I was like, okay, like how do I actually validate this? And so I literally have a friend in special forces and picked up the phone and I was like, hey, you're in special forces. How do you guys operate? And from a very generic premises, he was like, dude, every time we go out, we have one mission. And then he calls them later, we have tasks and priorities underneath, and you can't move along to the next mission until that mission's complete. And so I was like, do we agree that like special forces, Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, those types of people are some of the highest performing teams on the planet? Yes. Yeah. Okay. That's how they do it. Do you think it might be a good idea that like we operate the same way?
So one is identity. Like who are we, right? What was two?
Two, mission.
Mission, okay. Then what?
Clarity.
Wait. Mission and clarity are different?
Well, like no, clarity is just like the umbrella.
Yeah, okay. So number one is identity. Number two is
mission.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Yep. Three would be call them non-negotiables. A lot of people like to use standards. I just feel like it's such a buzzword in the industry and like nobody knows what the freak it means. It's just like, yeah, these are our standards, or other people call them like expectations too. Yeah. And so like you probably have non-negotiables in your relationship, right? Yeah. It's I think I saw a video the other day. It's like Chick-fil-A is closed on Sunday. It's non-negotiable. Like you can't, you can't go. And so figuring out like from a team or an individual, very small number, like 2 to 4 on like what those actually look like. Identity falls back into that clarity box too. So like we weave that back in. And then the last piece would be the emotional side. Again, it's like, I feel like that's the other is if I have my mission, I got to attach the emotions to it. Right. So once go ahead.
No, go.
And I was going to say, like, as we like move along with that, once we get clarity, once we get everybody on board, once we get everybody rowing in the same direction, is most people think it's like, okay, well, now I just need a belief. Like now I actually have to believe that everything that I said is true and I'm not totally full of shit. And so I call it like 4 stages of like belief, or 4 stages of momentum. Number 1 is needing. Most people, and that's the obsessive, the desperate of like, I got to have it. Step below that would be hoping, wishing, wanting. And I think this is where most people begin because they hope that they get X outcome. They wish they had Y, or they really want Z.
Yeah, I hope I make $1 million, bro.
Right. It's still desperate, right? It's not a good place to live. Trust me, I know. And so I think the third step is belief. And I was like, this is where most of you guys think that you're after. And so the example I always give them is I'm like, tell me how old.
Wait, that's the third step?
In the 4 like phases, in the 4 stages. Yeah. We're going down. So like needing, hoping, wishing, wanting, belief. And I asked somebody, I'm like, hey, how old are you? They're like 20. I'm like, you sure you're 20? They're like, yeah. I'm like, I got $1,000 cash in my book bag right now. Will you bet me you're 20? They're like, 100%. I'm like, exactly. Like if somebody asks you your age, you wouldn't say, I believe I'm 20, because what does it sound like? And they're like, I'm kind of unsure. I was like, totally. So subconsciously, as you say, it's like, I believe we can do da-da-da-da. There's still a smidgen of doubt. And so I think the final stage of that is just knowing, right? And that's like exclamation mark period on like everything. When you know who you are and you know your mission and you know
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
non-negotiables, it's like once we can tie all that back together, it's like now you literally, it's like you have no choice but to actually know what your full potential is. You actually have no
Yeah.
choice but how to show up in the arena. You have no choice about knowing the emotions that you want to feel and not just taking on stress and overwhelmment because like that's what everyone told you being a college athlete is supposed to be like, or that's what
Yeah.
everyone told you being a coach is supposed to be stressful.
Yeah.
It's not that you're not going to feel stress, but it's like, don't freaking wake up like that every single day. Like that's not
Yeah.
fun. It should be enjoyable, right?
Yeah.
And so I think like as I like the crescendo moment, right, so to speak, is the idea of like, dude, it's to enjoy success, right? Like it's let's not make things more complicated. Let's not overwhelm ourselves. Like let's get to know some of these basic things. Then everything starts to just naturally, I believe, like come together because you don't have to think about showing up, right?
Well, and yeah, and I think it's interesting. So when you say like this is what other people tell you, this is what a coach is or an athlete is or whatever, right? Like it's interesting, like in my in my world, the business world, the influencer world, and all of that, right? Like there's preconceived narratives of what it means to be a good coach or a good successful person, and we look at like there's a guy by the name of Russell Brunson in my world, and he's like just one of the most profitable like presenters, like just make insane money from stage, right? And like I'm a big Russell Brunson fan. He's a very good friend of mine, and like just like I'm a huge believer, right? However, when I tried to be Russell and like do everything that Russell did, right? What would happen is I got to a point that was good. I was able to operate good and I was able to get good results, right? But like when you're performing at the highest level, like Russell is, the little details matter. And so when Russell would do certain things and they would feel just a little off to me, or I couldn't fully embrace it or whatever, right? And I like wouldn't do them because what happened was is like kind of at the highest level, then the cracks were exposed and the whole thing kind of fell apart. It frustrated me, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, and by the way, it worked super well for Russell, but it wasn't until somebody came along and they had this like whole system that basically determined like what type of presenter you were, right? It was very scientifically like proven and data driven out. And I was like, okay, I'll listen to you, I guess. But then all of a sudden they're like, well, wait a second. You're not actually the same style as Russell. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I literally am Russell. Like, you know what I'm saying?
You
Like,
don't know. You don't
right.
know.
Like, you have no idea how long I've practiced like this. And they're like, but you're not, though. Like, your actual style is actually not. And so when they shifted it and they were like, you're actually this type of person, right? Yeah. And so like I fall into the same category as like a Tony Robbins, right? And, the others or whatever. When all of a sudden I did that, a lot of the same principles of like psychology and influence or whatever that Russell used, I still used. But I showed up differently. And now all of a sudden at the highest level, what I defaulted to was not what Russell was doing, which felt very unnatural for me because that was not where my default was. But rather I understood how I operated because this is how I operate there. And then I defaulted back to those and just made sure that I operated that way. And so now at the highest level, like when all the pressure was on, right? Like on all that, like I didn't go and try to be someone else. And this is, by the way, going back to like the stage thing, right? Like the reason I was so freaked out is I was like, oh my gosh, it's funny. It was Russell's stage, right?
Yeah.
Right. I'm sitting there, I'm like the night before, I'm like, oh my gosh, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, when I'm looking at my presentation, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to be Russell, or I'm trying to like see what the crowd want, or blah, 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 blah. And so like when I was just like, you know what, screw this. Might not work, but I'm just going to do what I would do. And like I went out there, Russell's like a very oh hey, and then like excitement trying to driven and like gets everybody like I just come out there and I was like, wow, like I'm just like power, energy, let's go. Like the room, I control the room, you do what I say, whether you like it or not type of person. Because I'm like, I am someone like when I'm on stage, like I make it so you cannot look away, right? You have to be watching, right? And when I have your full that's not Russell style, right? But guess what? I delivered that message insanely powerfully, right? In a way that like, I mean, it took me 4.5 hours almost to get back to my room. People just coming up and talking to me afterwards because I didn't go try to do what somebody else told me a coach did or a presenter did or a speaker did, right? And I feel like that's what you're like kind of what you're alluding to here is like, if you just try to self-talk your way into being Tom Brady or self-talk your way into being whatever everybody else is, in the highest level moments, you're going to freak because you're not going to know what to default to. But if you can figure out you first, yes, how you operate first, how you show up first, then in the highest level moments, you just default to that and it'll crush.
Yes. And I would even go a step further in saying is like, if you try to show up as, in your case, a Russell, if you try to show up as Tom Brady, whatever, is like the people around you, your teammates, or like I literally tell even a lot of the gymnasts this as well, because there's actual judges on the side judging you. I'm like, that's energy. Like that can be felt, that awkwardness, that like uncertainty of like, it's like something was just like, you don't even know, right? Like
right.
you can't,
There's antsy. There's not power. It's not power.
Yeah. Versus when you're actually like authentically,
Just know.
And
right.
yes, 100%. And most of the time it's different and it's better. Like
For sure.
it's like,
dude, you see it, dude. You see it in like athletes, like the famous.
It's the it, right? Like no one knows what it is, but everyone was like,
but it's
he's
the it,
freaking
right?
got it.
And like the famous one when Tom Brady, I'm a huge Brady fan, right? Like huge Brady fan. And like when Tom Brady was down 28-3 in the Super Bowl, right? And like he just put his head down and hung it in there and he like looked up and like you could just see it was just like, oh, there it is, right? And it was just like, boom, greatest comeback and hit ever, and it will never be topped, right? It's just it was just there.
There's a clip too. I don't remember how it was. Mohamed Sanu. I actually know him. He was on the Falcons, and I forget how many they were up. It was like 21 or something like that. And there's a sound bite of him on the sidelines, and they're like, "It's over, it's over, it's over." And he's like, "Still Tom Brady."
I know exactly the clip you're talking about. Yeah, he's like, "I don't know." Everybody's like, "Bro, it's still Tom Brady. It's still Tom Brady, right?" And he's like, "Yeah," talking to his teammate. But yeah, and I think that's super interesting as far as like to people listening right now. Like I always try to figure out whenever I'm either being interviewed or interviewing or just having conversations like this, right? Like I want to know why I should listen to somebody.
Yeah.
I want to know what makes them special and unique. I was just on the phone actually with an investor person earlier today, right? And we were talking and we were going back and forth and she's like, this is what I like wanted. And then she turned it over to me and she was like, so like, what do you think or whatever? And like the first thing I said, I was like, well, before I answer anything, I'm going to tell you like, this is my way of doing things.
Yeah.
This is why I'm the best at what I do in this category. Now, if you don't like that, that's fine, right? Because I get, I'm not the only way, right? But like, this is why people work with me. I'm going to share that with you here. So I'm going to come at this knowing that I am absolutely certain what I do. And if you work with me, it will absolutely work. But not the only way. Other have people different opinions, but this way does, right? And so coming from that, I go, okay, this is why. And so like for you, you come at, it seems to me at least, that like you focus on understanding the athlete and then building the actual athletics or skills on top of the athlete rather than trying to go and change the athlete through random self-talk or whatever to match what skill they think or the way that they should perform.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yes. I think to maybe even draw like, I think I do believe at a very like general level, a lot of people know just from a personality standpoint how they are, right? Are they energetic and they rah, or are they like cool, calm, and collective? Like from a general standpoint, most people like know how they are. And so I always tell them, because the first time I get in front of a team, especially, it's like I'm very loud, I'm obnoxious, like there's cuss words, and they're just like, everybody's like, oh my God, dude, you came in here like guns blazing. And I always tell them, follow up. I'm like, I said, yes. I said, here's the thing. If you liked cool, calm, and collective, and I came in here and I played that role, I said, you know what would be the worst thing ever? And they're like, no, what? I'll be like, you hired me for 12 months, because then I have to come back and have to pretend to be that person over and over and over again. And that's how so many of you guys live. You're trying to be somebody that you're not, and it's effing exhausting, versus you already know foundationally who you are. Do you need the hype up speech before you get on the field? If you do, great. If you don't, like, don't pretend like you do. Don't put a costume on that like doesn't serve you. Right. Yeah. And so I think that
I also think though the one level further. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, that was kind of it.
Okay. I think that a lot of times people conceptually know, but then because it's not validated by maybe it's a coach, maybe it's other team members or whatever, like They don't feel like they don't even know how to live it out fully, right? They don't
Totally
know how
agree.
to
Yeah.
like that, right? And I feel like you create the environment for that of like really helping these athletes and these players like create like know how to live out fully without being like degrading to their team or being negative, like just fully understanding themselves. And I think, I don't know coaches as well as you do. So that, I'm not saying all coaches are this way or whatever, but I feel like sometimes a lot of coaches are just like, hey, it's my way or the highway type of deal.
Totally.
And it's like, as coaches, it's like, yo, you're way more powerful when you've got someone that can come in and help develop. Like coaches have enough on their plate as it is, right? They
100%.
need someone like you to come in and like, you know what I'm saying? Like create that environment, create that world for it. But when you can come in and do that, it makes the coach's job so much easier because now they know that they're athlete. Now it's just like, okay, cool. I know what they're going to default to. I'm just going to put them here and I know how they're going to perform. There's no question. They're not going to choke. I know this is how they operate. This is what they're made for. So I think that's really, really powerful for sure.
And it's even, I mean, I get texts from coaches like during the season all the time. It's like, emotionally, where are they? And I'll be honest, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's like, because nobody else is talking to them about that. And it's, there's a scenario last year. It's before the conference championship. Coach was like, where are they at? And I was like, not in a good place. And pulled this person from a lineup. It literally ignited a spark and went on to be 2 weeks later went on to be like a national champion individually. Right. And so it's like, I think understanding that it's like, probably wouldn't have been good if they went ahead and competed this person.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like,
knowing that it's good stuff, dude. Good
bridging the gap. Totally. Yeah. So I got one more last thing, wrap up things with you.
Yeah.
Since you hit it with me all the time is, where you at in terms of like your core message to the world?
That's a good question.
Because you've been going through some shifts and transitions in your own life.
Yeah, but in a good way. Yeah,
totally. 100%.
Lots of stuff. Yeah. I kind of alluded to this before. I mean, I grew up with not well financially, right? Just kind of broke and felt trapped for most of my life, right? Just like not being able to make decisions, not being able to have what I want to do, to not just lack of finances, but just like things out of my control. I didn't have the time, didn't have the money, didn't have the resources, look, whatever. And I just felt very trapped. And I think I spent most of my life trying, like looking for and going to external validation things, like to go winning, right? I love winning. I'm so competitive, right? So I want to win. Like looking for winning or money or success or fame or like whatever to ultimately go and fill the gap or like go to like complete me or like whatever it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would see these people that they would be winning at the highest level. They'd be making so much money, right? Or they'd have so much fame or they'd have so many results. Like they were just as trapped as I was when I was broken, I had nothing, right?
Right.
And when I look at that and I think about that, I'll go like, that's not freedom.
Yeah.
Right. Just because you have more money doesn't mean it's freedom. And so like my message to people that I would love for people to like really think about is like, you can be free. Like really, really, you can be free at a core level, but that freedom isn't going to come just through winning. Let me tell you, I love winning. I love making, like you should do all of those things because freedom is that much better when you are, right? But that core message and that thing of like figuring out what that looks like, what is required, finding that internal validation, finding who you are, right? Like with that, but like coming back to going like, you can be free and understand that freedom does not come through winning. Freedom does not come through like going out and getting all these things. Freedom, you start with freedom and then you create higher and higher and higher levels of that freedom, right? As you progress, right? And I work with a lot of people that, make a lot of money or want to make a lot of money, right? And I'm like, yo, let's go get that money for sure. Because there's freedom when you're rich. There's freedom when you're, but it can also be a trap. Yeah. So my message is like, you can be absolutely free, detached from the results of the world around you. You can be truly, truly free if you actually understand what that looks like. And that's why I hope everyone understands. Just because you think you know how the world works, I don't know how the world works. I know a version of how the world works. So why don't I find the version or a version of the world that allows me to go and be free and also then go compete or win at the highest level? That'd be my message to people. Is like, just, you can be free. Yeah. Whatever you're going through, whatever you feel trapped in, whatever you're seeking for, whatever, you can have freedom right now. If you just don't understand what that looks like.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I think athletes too, it's like, it's kind of, I love that word now. Like the more that I think about it, it's like that freedom allows you to actually win. That freedom allows you to show up. That
It
freedom
allows you to be
allows you
powerful because it
yeah,
doesn't matter what's around you, right?
yeah,
The reason I'm able to go and win in a lot of areas, and by the way, I lose in a lot of areas sometimes, right? I have my losing seasons or whatever, but the reason I don't let those things define me is because like freedom is not determined by an outcome, right? That's why I
right.
chase freedom more than winning, right? I chase freedom first, winning second, right? I love winning. I love it, love, 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 love it, right? But like the freedom that allows me to just show up regardless of what's going on. I mean, this I'm going to show up, this I'm going to execute, this I'm going to go. And most of the time you win a lot more.
Cool.
Yeah.
Love it, man.
Good
Love
stuff,
it.
man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Good stuff. I always love rocking out and just
Yeah.
shooting the shit with you, man. So
Yeah, man. Good stuff.
hopefully everybody, yeah, got something out of it. Love you.